Hello everyone, Dr. Eames here. This time I'd like to talk about a few more topics from our introductory chapter number 1, beginning with organizational resources. The reason we talk about this topic is it's where managers get their work done. And so we have 4 categories of resources where everything you do as a manager falls into one or another of these areas. First, we have physical resources, human resources, information resources, and financial resources. Everything we do falls into here somewhere. When we talk about physical resources, these are the raw materials we need to get things built or transformed in some way into a product. It includes our office equipment, our production equipment, our facilities if we own a building, any equipment we have, anything that's physical, it's a physical resource. Human resources speak for themselves. This is about our labor. And of course, we have, like I mentioned last time, 2 types of employees, exempt and non-exempt. So we have our labor and we have our managerial talent when it comes to the human resources. Information resources include data across the board in all categories. And it has to be useful data. So hopefully our information resources include some data that's been analyzed and that we've taken a look at and said this is what it means. And we have all those linkages, of course, to our information resources that go to all the different areas. For instance, financial resources, we could have all sorts of information about that. Whereas financial resources is an entire category of its own of organizational resource. Here we're talking about the capital we have as an organization, the investments we make, our revenue streams, the money we owe, the money we're taking in, and so forth. And so everything we do as a manager falls into these areas somewhere. What managers really do, and this is the heart of any fundamentals of management course, are functional roles. Managers have 4 functional roles. These came out of theories and discussion and talk in the United States, in Europe, in the UK, and so forth during the 19th century and certainly long into the 20th century. And we ended up with the functional roles of managers that we're following today. Now these came to us from Henry Fayol. This is back before the turn of the 20th century. He was a Frenchman. He came up with all these ideas of what managers ought to be doing and so forth, and he gave us various lists and explained them extensively, and we've sort of distilled that information down today to the functional roles. So those 4 functional roles is the heart of what we do. We plan and we make decisions. We organize. We control things, and this means controlling information, not physically moving people or parts around, controlling things by getting feedback and information. And then we are leading. Inputs from the environment come in. These come in the areas that we've just mentioned. Human resources, physical resources, financial resources, informational resources. Things come into an organization, managers act on them in their various roles, and hopefully we attain our goals. We hope that there's some efficiency along the way, and that we are effective and actually get our goals accomplished. The thing to note about these 4 roles is, in some companies, some organizations, you're going to do more of one thing than another. It really depends on context, and I think that's probably the biggest reason that we do see contingency management work so well. In other words, do what works for you. As long as it's legal and moral and ethical, then you're fine. You can copy anybody as long as you're not stealing a patent or something like that. When we say we're going to be planning and making decisions, we're really setting the organization's goals, and we're deciding what's the best way to achieve those goals. When we organize, we're saying what's the best way to group our activities? What jobs do we need? It leads us to figure out what departments do we need, and so forth, and how to handle resources that are coming in and going out. When we're controlling, it's a monitoring function. We're gathering information constantly about our operations, about our employees, about all our processes. And the idea is we take this information, we analyze it, quite often some of it on daily and hourly basis, others a little bit longer time frames. But the idea is gather the necessary information to keep us on track, to let us know how we're doing, and so forth. Facilitate our goal attainment. And then, of course, leading. Leading is really just motivating people, your labor force, your people that report to you, to inspire them to do above and beyond what's really asked of them. And if you can pull that off, you're going to be very successful as a manager. When we look at managers, there are different ways to understand what's going on. The first way to look at it is by level. And so we have at the bottom, first line managers, in the middle managers, and at the top managers. It's as simple as that. But identifying which is which without knowing anything about a company is sometimes difficult, so there's a few rules that we could use to help us figure those things out. All top managers are going to be VPs or higher. So vice presidents, CEOs, presidents, those people are the top managers. Middle managers is the hardest one to find out because the job title or position does not necessarily tell us. There are many confusing terms out there that a first line manager might have that is also shared by a middle manager at a different company. So middle managers, the way to find out just by a few facts if it's a middle manager or not is middle managers report to top management and first line managers report to middle managers. So if you can find out a hierarchical chart or organizational chart of some type, or just find out who reports to who, you could determine if someone's a middle manager or a first line manager. Now, first line managers might be the most important managers in the company, honestly, because they handle the employees and they get the work of the company done. So these first line managers report to middle managers. Usually we don't see them reporting to top management, but occasionally it may happen, and we're going to have some exceptions to these general rules here and there depending on your business context. And we will have assistant managers reporting to first line managers. These assistant managers are also considered first line managers. They just report to another manager and they're a step below, but they are not labor. They are considered managerial talent. Now, another way for us to examine management, to really understand it, is by area. And so we have managers in our different departments. We have a marketing manager and a finance manager, maybe an operations manager who could be called many things, because when you say that word operations, it means you're doing something. And so a lot of times it would be the plant manager or the manufacturing manager or something like that. And we have HR managers and administrators and all sorts of other classifications of management by area. So that's another way to understand what's going on. This leads us to talk about what are the roles of management. Well, we have Henry Mintzberg here to really thank for giving us this. He looked at the work of Henry Fayol and other early theorists, and he came out with this idea that, well, top managers in particular, but all managers are doing some variety of things. And his managerial roles, Henry Mintzberg's, were their things that managers do fall into three general areas: interpersonal roles, decisional roles, and informational roles. And each of those categories has subcategories of behavior and things that managers do. So let's just take a look at the interpersonal roles first. Interpersonal roles means just that, between people. So the manager in this sense would be a figurehead, a leader, and a liaison. And all of those various roles bespeak to connecting in some way to the outside world or within the company, and so forth. You are leading, you are being a liaison, which by definition means you are connecting things together, and you are being the figurehead. You represent your organization. Now we have decisional roles as well. These are the things that happen in companies. You have to negotiate sometimes. That's a decisional role. Sometimes you have to allocate resources. Sometimes you have to handle disturbances. This might be, for many, the toughest part of a manager's job, because you have to make personnel decisions and you have to solve problems, and sometimes they involve people and their futures and their lives. And sometimes also our decisional roles involve being an entrepreneur. But that does depend on your industry and the type of company you're in. Now, when we come to the third type of role, it's the informational ones. And this is where you're really disseminating information in that role, and there are various categories. Certainly an informational role that's important is monitoring. So you're checking to see that you're on track, keeping up, that you're reaching the goals, and you're headed towards your goals like you want. Now, the other two roles are more clear. The disseminator, your role is to give out information, and you make decisions on who gets what information, what is the level of importance, who needs to see it and who doesn't, and so forth. And you may be a disseminator to the outside world, to the public, or it may be just within the organization. So these roles, all of them, are within and without, so internal, external application of these things. And then the final informational role is simply as a spokesperson. If you're the top person, you will go out there or you're appointed by the top person, then you are being the spokesperson for the organization. You can get out that information that everybody needs to know. I have one more thing I'd like to talk about this time, the skills that managers need. So we have managerial roles, we have the functions I talked about earlier, but we also have a variety of skills that managers need. Not all of these skills will be needed by all managers in every context. So the type of skills and the emphasis on them is going to really vary with your business context. What industry are you in, and what are all those factors you're dealing with on a daily basis. So first we have technical skills. How do things work? Knowing how things work. The only manager, the three that we've talked about, that really needs to know exactly how things work is probably that first line manager who is supervising people that are doing the work of the company and so forth. Middle managers and top managers only need to know a certain amount of technical details. That's up to that first line manager to get that real work done. Now we also have conceptual skills. This means being able to see the big picture, to be able to think out of the box, to be able to conceptualize and think, do we want to do this product? What is a good product? Should we take this course of action or some other? Using our thinking conceptually to figure out what could happen and what are the implications of all the choices we make. We have to have some political skills. That depends. Quite often, if you're a manager, you do need a certain amount of political skills because life in our culture is inherently political. We do negotiate and so forth. And we have status matters to deal with and so forth. So political skills are knowing how to work together with people and so forth, how to build successful coalitions, and knowing what level of activity, of political type of activity, is too much for an organization and so forth. We have to have good time management skills, of course. Time management is everything. It is not just making appointments. It is planning ahead. It's setting the agenda. It's keeping on track and all of those things. Decision-making skills. These are something that we have to continuously improve and learn to do better. Make our decisions. We want to make them timely. We want to make the right decisions. Nobody can get it right all the time. Young managers are bound to make occasional errors. So what? We're people. As long as people's jobs are not lost and vast amounts of money aren't lost, it's a learning experience. But we do have to do decision making, and it is a skill that you will get better at over time, and you can learn to get better at. We also have diagnostic skills. The best way to explain this is the doctor metaphor. You go to the doctor when you don't feel good so they could diagnose you. In other words, they're going to say, what is wrong? They're going to look and say, what is the problem? And then usually a diagnosis is followed with some sort of prescription. Here's what you do to take care of it. It's much the same for managers. You're trying to figure out if there's a problem, what is the nature of the problem, and then what are my available solutions and what are the smart ones to do. And then finally, the last skill I want to talk about today is the interpersonal skills. Those interpersonal skills are really quite a bit of what I've talked about earlier with the managerial roles. You have to be able to communicate with people to get your message across, and in turn you have to be able to be a good listener to understand what people are telling you so you can analyze and really bring your communication skills to the forefront. Communicating might be the most important thing we do as managers because obviously organizations are about working with people, and that's what managers do. Okay folks, that's good enough for this time. I'll see you on the next one.